my concerns of the state of Connecticut, the financial position of Connecticut as we speak, which is affecting our businesses, it's affecting our real estate, which is the major asset in our residents' balance sheets. And what's going on in the state is detrimental to real estate, it's detrimental to business growth, it's detrimental to economic growth, and it's detrimental to the tax base that will be fleeing the state, especially as they age. For instance, Social Security benefits, which is the mainstay for most retirees. The state of Connecticut taxes Social Security benefits. If you go over the border, the state of New York does not tax Social Security benefits. Why would somebody want to pay a 6 to 7% stipend to live in Connecticut with what's going on here? Especially in the high earners who pay most of the taxes. They're fleeing the state of Connecticut because don't forget, Connecticut has an estate tax. Most states do not have an estate tax, which means when you pass and you want to pass down whatever savings you have, whatever assets you have, to your children, to your grandchildren, to charities, it's going to have to be net of Connecticut estate tax. If you move to another state, you don't have that burden. Now, under the new federal tax code, the exclusion for single people is $11 million. I believe it's $22 million if you're married. Connecticut is saying they're not going to follow the federal government, which means 99% of Americans will have no estate tax. However, if you live in the state of Connecticut, you're going to have no federal estate tax, but you're going to pay a Connecticut estate tax, unless they follow the feds. But in my opinion, they're not going to do that because the state is on the verge of bankruptcy. There's a predicted $200 million budget deficit within the next year or so. And that's causing people to flee. Because what's the governor's proposal? More taxes. Maybe not an income tax, but when you raise fares on the MTA, Metro North, to commute to your job, when you charge tolls on the roads, when you charge for buying tires replacements on your car, that's a hidden income tax. And people don't want it anymore. I mean, look what's happening in the stock market. I do not believe that we're going to have positive returns in the market. There's going to be volatility, in my opinion, until such time that we're through the midterm elections. Because the markets do not like the unknown. And there's a lot of unknown. What's going to happen in the midterms, what's happening with trade between America, China, other countries. And this is huge. This is huge. The markets are going to stay volatile, which means the amount of money that has been erased in the retirement funds of a lot of people, Connecticut residents and residents throughout the United States, has been significantly depleted over the last couple of months from where the market highs were. Now, that'll affect people more in the state of Connecticut where you have a high income tax, and under the new tax code, you won't be allowed to deduct more than $10,000 of your state income tax and your state real estate taxes. So there's no benefit. So when your resources are depleted, you have to have an offsetting to get to a zero-sum game. How does one do that? Move out of a state with high taxes, and you move to a state like Florida that has no income tax, Texas has no income tax, Nevada has no income tax, okay, Wyoming has no income tax, and the populations in these places are booming. The real estate is booming. Even California, with a 13.9% income tax, and with all its problems with immigration, real estate prices in San Francisco are just blowing up. But in the state of Connecticut, real estate prices, especially on the high end, are falling rapidly. The rest of the nation has recovered from the great debacle of 2005, 6, and 7 to almost new highs in residential real estate. We're up 6.9% nationally over the last year. Connecticut is down. Still down. Well, if you keep raising taxes, the real estate value is going to decrease. You cannot keep increasing the burden of the taxpayer to pay off your uncontrollable debt. And there's a few things that I would recommend are done. Number one, the transportation fund in the state of Connecticut. Stop rating it and using it for everything under the sun. It's meant for transportation. It's meant for our MTA. It's meant for our roads. The proposal is by 2020 to increase the cost of an MTA commuter ticket by 21%. And the towns in Fairfield County like New Canaan and Danbury cut the branch lines. That'll be devastating to those towns' economies, which are already suffering with empty commercial property and falling real estate prices. Put tolls on our roads? I mean, to me, there's other ways. I mean, even commercial vehicles could go up 684 and go into Massachusetts and go up to get I-95. You don't have to use I-95 through Connecticut. People who live in Fairfield County could go through New York. They don't have to use Connecticut roads. A $3 tax on a replacement tire? Well, when you live close to a border like you do Connecticut residents who live near Massachusetts, Rhode Island, New York, well, you could go over the border and you could buy your tires. These are just some examples of ideas that'll never come to fruition to cure the problems in the state of Connecticut. Let's look at the state's earned income credit. Connecticut is one of the only states that has a state earned income credit. The average person that qualifies, and that's people who earn below a certain threshold with a family, the average stipend that they get back from the state is $1,300. The cost of administering that is $168 million. Am I missing something? You're spending $168 million on administration, which is way above the amount you give back to the low-income earner. That doesn't make sense to me. That's more of a tax burden. The pension burden in the state of Connecticut, the giveaways that our governor gave in the latest budget to the labor unions, it's unconscionable. It's going to drive the state to bankruptcy. You have to raise the retirement age. Back when the retirement age was after 20 years of service or 25 years of service, the average age that people would pass away was in the 60s, maybe at World War II in the 50s, the 60s, the low 70s. Now, it's in the 80s. We have more millennials, I mean centurions, than we have ever seen before, which means if you get a job, a public sector job, when you're 20 years old, you can retire at 40 and get a pension. Well, if you live to be 80, that's 40 years, 90's 50, simple math, 100 is 60 years. So you're paying for non-service, for non-productivity, for a greater period of time than you did for actual productivity when the person worked. And to make matters worse, what they do is they take the last 3 years of employment, they average in those wages and say that's what the pension's based on. So what's the scam? The scam is you give the most amount of overtime to the people who are going to retire so they get a higher pension. That's unconscionable. These things are destroying the state of Connecticut. And to boot, the leader of our state house, his full-time job is president of the largest public sector union in the state of Connecticut. Well, you don't let the fox in the hen house. It's not going to work. To those who get social benefits, well, you should be concerned also, and let me tell you why. Because if a state goes bankrupt, and if a state can't meet its burden of indebtedness, if the state can't pay its bonds, our bond rate, the state's bond rating has gone down. Well, what is the necessity of what they're going to do? They're going to cut social benefits. So yes, if you get social benefits from the state of Connecticut, you have to be concerned and you have to vote in this coming gubernatorial election for conservatives. Conservative financial minds that'll fix our budget and stop taxing, because your benefits are going to go away. And that should be a concern to you. Because if there's no money in the coffers, you can't pay social benefits to people who are retired, low-income earners, veterans. It's simple. It's simple mathematics. We need to do something. We need to cut costs. And we need to do it quickly.